Well folks, welcome to the video where we're going to show you how to make miniature hinges for use in jewellery and in miniature furniture. Right, so next off what we're going to do is lay out the metal. I'm just going to introduce you to another couple of tools. Obviously this is the felt tip pen. The felt tip pen is used to create blue on the surface so that when you mark it, it scratches through the surface to the brass underneath. You can also use engineer's blue, which was invented in the 1800s, but it's you need a big pot of it, and it kind of stinks a bit for inside your house and that, so you maybe don't want to use that. Right, so the next method is I'm going to make two hinges out of this particular piece of sheet metal. This is 0.2 millimeter and it's made of brass. So the tool that I'm going to use is essentially a set of calipers. They're quite stiff and they're quite pointy. So what you do is you get your calipers to approximately halfway, like so, and then you keep going until you're about halfway, like so, so that you know where the halfway point is. So then when you've done that, you use the calipers, you run one side down that edge, and then you create a mark down the centre of the brass so that it can be cut in half, because I'm going to make two hinges out of this. And then we're going to mark off the rest of it. Okay, so this is what our marked off hinges look like. This area here, this is 2.5 millimeters between here and here, and between here and here. This is the tab. Right, these are going to form the pin tabs, and this is the tab. These are the pin tabs, 2.5 millimeters, just here, and this is the main tab, which is going to be circular, like the one that I showed you at the very beginning. Okay, so once you've done that, the areas that are going to be removed have been shaded, and remember that they're alternate, because when a hinge fits together, it fits together like this. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to a new tool, essentially a scoring tool. That's the business end just there. So what has to happen is use a steel ruler and a scoring tool, and these tabs here on the inside have to have a line scored just here, and again just here. You don't need to do these because you got access to those with the shears, and again that one, but not that one, and that one, but not that one. So that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, the next job is to cut the slots and the tabs, and to do that we use a good quality pair of nail scissors with hardened blades. So need to be quite good ones. It's no good using cheap ones. They need to have quite a good tolerance and quite a good sharp blade. When you're done cutting, you should look something like this, where essentially each tab slot has been cut on the edge. Okay, so what we do next is we've got access to that line, so we go to the edge tabs, which is that one and that one, and we trim those off. So that's where we're at now. Next we're going to move the other tabs that have been shaded, and you can stick a file into these corners and just clean up a little bit. Okay, so the next job, as you can see, we scored that, if you remember, and we scored that one. So the next job is you basically take your pliers and you fold back the tab and then work it backwards and forwards until it snaps off. So if we now straighten these up a bit, we've basically got our hinge templates there. I'm going to do a little bit of filing to clean these edges up. It's important when you do the scoring that you only score between there and there and between there and there. You don't want to score the pin tabs at all, because it will weaken them, and you definitely don't want to do that. Marking them with a scribe is not very deep, so that doesn't really matter too much, but the scoring is quite deep. with a scoring tool. So there we are, we're almost ready to start bending the pins over. Okay, so it needs to be pointed out that the next thing we're going to do is try to roll these tabs. These are the pin tabs here that you've cut out. We're trying to roll those over the wire, and I'll show you how to do that. And you need to brighten up the metal, because when the tab rolls over, that tip area there is going to need to contact with solder, and this area here needs to contact with solder, so they need to be clean. Clean it with fairly fine emery, because you don't want to remove the scribe marks, because you can see the scribe marks for the hinge shape there. So next you need to cut a piece of 0.4mm brass pin wire, which you can buy pretty easily on eBay. Turn over the end there, just so that you can take the pin in and out while you're working with it. And then we need to start bending the tabs over. So what you want to do is use the silversmith's flat pliers to curl the ends over, so that when you bend the whole thing over, the ends are already curled and ready to go. Otherwise they'll end up going straight down, which is maybe not necessarily what you want to do. And the way that you kind of do that, and there's not much depth of field here, but you can just about see it, is by nipping a hold of the end. It's kind of hard to show actually, but nipping a hold of the end and just curling it over. So you should end up with two pieces that look like this. So what you want to do now is use the flat pliers to roll brass tabs over the wire, and you got to do it quite neatly, and it's difficult to show on camera, but I think you get the general idea. You should then end up with something like this, and that is both halves of your hinge facing outwards. That will be cut in the centre later on. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to show you is, you can see here these white areas here. This is where I've put a small amount of borax flux. Borax flux does two things. It stops the surface of the metal from oxidizing whilst you're soldering, although keeping the hinge in the flame will also do that. And it also creates a sort of a pathway that sucks the solder into the cracks, kind of. And so on top of the borax flux, you can see on these ones there, I've put a bit of solder paste just here. So it's important that you don't overdo the solder paste, and don't flood the area with solder, because if the tubes, these tubes you've just made, get too full of solder, you won't be able to fit the hinge pin in, and then it'll be pretty difficult to clear out. 0.4 drills are not particularly stiff, and they just break off. So next thing is to actually put this under the soldering iron and solder it, and it's important that you do not have the hinge pin in when you do this. Okay. Okay, so to do this, I'm using a little micro blowtorch, which you can buy pretty easily on the internet. It's just refilled like a gas lighter, and these are my newly soldered pieces, and you can just see the score marks for the hinge shape. So these now need to be cut in half, and the two sections need to be mated together. Okay, so here we have the hinges. They've essentially been cut in half, and there you go, they'll be like that, and you can just see how they fit together there. And then they're basically turned around, and because you mark them off on the same piece of metal, they should be roughly the same size, which makes for quite a neat hinge. Now you may have to file them a little bit to get them to mesh properly, like that, but it shouldn't be too bad, because if you remember, when you mark the tabs off, you mark them straight across to one side to the other, So that should mean they do fit. They are a pretty good size and pretty good fit. So the next job is to put the pin in, and once the pin is in, we'll then use the flat pliers to straighten them up a bit. Once the pin is inserted into the hinge, you can then use the flat pliers to straighten out the various bits of the hinge so it looks nice and straight, and you can then file them all up and get them ready for them. This is the preliminary finish really. You need to do a lot of sanding and polishing to get them nice and shiny. Well, that pretty much demonstrates how you make a tiny hinge for jewellery or for a doll's house. And of course you can make them even smaller than that, and you can make them a lot bigger than that too. And this is a method that was taught to me when I was at school at 10 years old. We didn't have jewellery classes, we had metalwork classes, and we actually made a hinge which was about 2 or 3 inches wide, made of mild steel. And this is exactly the same method that I used then as we're using now. The only minor difference is that we've soldered the tabs down with a mild steel hinge. It's strong enough not to need soldering down, so that's the main key difference. Now then, one last thing to say in this video. Essentially these pins, you bend the pin over there so that you can withdraw the pin, so that you can solder each half to the pieces of jewellery, or stick them down in position onto your doll's house furniture or whatever it is that you're going to do. And you leave that like that until you're absolutely finished and you're at the very last thing you need to do, and then you get some blunt shears and you shear off the pins either side and file them smooth. Don't use sharp shears. What you usually use blunt shears is the blunt shears will deform the metal at the end slightly, and that stops the pin coming out. So you use a pair of blunt shears, and that then would be your hinge pretty much finished and installed. If you're going to rivet the hinges, then you're going to drill holes in it and use rivets instead of using solder. Then you can cut the pins off now and file them smooth. But otherwise you would leave them like that until they were assembled onto the piece of jewellery. Okay folks? Okay, so that brings us to the end of this video, making tiny hinges for jewellery and dollhouse furniture. Hope you enjoyed the video. Look out for more videos. This is Avian signing off now. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.